Have you ever worn something so valuable that people assumed it was fake simply because you weren't screaming about it from the rooftops? Have you ever been in a room full of people who judged your worth by how loud you were about your possessions rather than what you actually possessed? That's exactly where I found myself on a sunny Saturday afternoon, standing near the gift table at my best friend's bridal shower, surrounded by pastel balloons and champagne flutes, wearing a necklace that caught the light in ways that made people stop and stare. The venue was picture perfect, one of those Instagram-ready spaces with a dessert table that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a photo backdrop covered in flowers, and about 30 women dressed in their absolute best, phones perpetually ready to capture the perfect shot. I was standing there, chatting casually with a few guests, my hand unconsciously touching the delicate chain around my neck, when my cousin's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. She was standing in the middle of her little circle of friends, but her voice carried with that particular quality of someone who wants to be overheard while pretending they don't. She said, "Oh my God, that necklace is cute. You can totally tell it's not real, though." And then, as if that wasn't enough, she added with a laugh that seemed to bounce off every wall in that beautifully decorated room, "She can't afford real jewelry." The words landed like stones, each one carefully aimed, each one designed to mark me as less than, as someone playing dress-up with costume pieces, as someone who belonged in a different tier of society than the one she imagined herself occupying. Her friends laughed, that knowing kind of laugh that says, "We're all in on the joke together." And I watched as several heads turn in my direction, eyes traveling from my face down to the necklace and back up again, assessing, judging, cataloging me into whatever box my cousin had just built with her words. Some faces showed sympathy, others showed that particular satisfaction people get when they witness someone else being put in their place. And all I could do in that moment was stand there, with my fingers still touching that delicate chain, feeling the cool weight of the stones against my skin, and think about the single sentence that was repeating in my mind like a mantra. Fake. This single piece costs more than your car and your starter home combined. $320,000, certified, appraised, and fully insured. But I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. Because some revelations are too delicious to waste on an immediate reaction. Some truths deserve a stage, an audience, and perfect timing. 2 hours later, when the jeweler's official appraisal folder was lying on the gift table and the host was reading aloud that estimated replacement value of $320,000, when you could have heard a pin drop in that room full of women who, moments before, had been laughing and chatting, when my cousin's face froze in exactly the same way my diamonds caught and held the light, unchanging and brilliant and absolutely undeniable, that's when I understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't served hot or cold. It's served certified and appraised with a side of absolute, irrefutable documentation. Let me take you back to the beginning of this story, because my cousin and I have history, the kind of complicated family history that spans years and gatherings and 1,000 tiny moments of comparison and competition. She's always been the fashion girl in the family, the one who showed up to every event wearing the latest trends, carrying bags with logos so prominent you could see them from across the room, posting Instagram hauls that featured stacks of shopping bags and carefully arranged flat lays of her newest purchases. The family loved it, loved her, loved commenting on her expensive taste and her eye for luxury. They'd say things like, "She really knows how to put herself together. She looks so successful. She has such refined taste." And she did have taste, I'll give her that. But it was the kind of taste that required constant validation, constant visibility, constant proof that she was winning at whatever game she thought we were all playing. Me? I've always been more minimal in my approach to style. I prefer clean lines, simple silhouettes, pieces that don't scream for attention but whisper quality to those who know how to listen. I don't wear logo bags or trend-driven clothes that'll be outdated in 6 months. I invest in things that last, in craftsmanship over flash, in pieces that tell a story rather than broadcast a brand. But to my cousin, my simplicity read as something else entirely. To her, my minimalism wasn't a choice, it was a limitation. She'd been teasing me about my style choices for years, making little comments at family gatherings that always seemed to land just on the edge of acceptable, where they could be laughed off as jokes if anyone called her out. She'd ask if my outfits were from the mall, said with just enough condescension to make it clear she thought the mall was beneath her. She'd suggest I should invest in at least one real piece, as if I was somehow lacking in authenticity because I wasn't covered in obvious displays of wealth. The family would laugh, uncomfortable but complicit, and I'd smile and change the subject because confronting her would make me look sensitive or jealous or unable to take a joke. At a cousin's birthday party, she'd made a comment about how my watch was nice for what it was, heavily implying that what it was cheap. At Thanksgiving, she'd asked loudly if I'd started shopping at better stores yet, as if my current stores were somehow shameful. Every gathering brought a new dig, a new implication, a new subtle assertion that she occupied a higher rung on the ladder of taste and sophistication than I did. And every time I let it slide, because what was I supposed to do? Pull out my bank statements, list my investments, explain that quality and cost aren't always correlated with visibility? That seemed tacky, seemed like exactly the kind of response she wanted, proof that her comments got under my skin. But here's what she didn't know, what she could possibly have guessed from her surface-level assessment of my style choices. I'm not broke. I'm not struggling. I'm not shopping at discount stores because that's all I can afford. I have a career that I've built carefully over years, a business that generates substantial income, investments that have matured into something significant. Or maybe it was an inheritance that I handled wisely, or a business opportunity that paid off beyond my wildest expectations. The specifics don't matter as much as the reality, which is that I have money, real money, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself with logos and labels. I just choose to live differently than she does. I choose to invest in quality over quantity, in pieces that matter to me rather than pieces that impress strangers on Instagram. The necklace I wore to that bridal shower wasn't some impulse purchase or costume jewelry that I was trying to pass off as real. It was a deliberate, significant acquisition, the kind you make when you've reached a milestone that deserves marking. Maybe I'd had a particularly successful year in business and decided to commemorate it with something tangible and beautiful. Maybe it was an heirloom piece that I'd had redesigned and reset with stones that transformed it from dated to timeless. Maybe it was a gift to myself after achieving something I'd worked toward for years. Whatever the specific story, the result was the same. A necklace featuring genuine diamonds, expertly cut and carefully set, designed by a jeweler who understood that true luxury doesn't need to shout. The price tag was approximately $320,000, a number that included not just the stones, but the craftsmanship, the design work, the countless hours of skill that went into creating something that looked deceptively simple. When I made that purchase, or accepted that inheritance, or however that necklace came into my life, the jeweler had strongly recommended that I get it officially appraised and insured. They explained that a piece of this value needed documentation, needed certification, needed a paper trail that would protect me if anything ever happened to it. So I did exactly that. I had it appraised by a certified gemologist who examined every stone, verified every specification, and produced an official document complete with their professional letterhead, signature, photographs, and that all-important line about estimated replacement value. That document went into a folder in my safe, along with the insurance policy that covered the piece for its full appraised value. I wasn't planning to walk around showing people receipts for my jewelry. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just protecting an investment that mattered to me. The funny thing is, I don't usually wear that necklace. It's special, it's significant, and I save it for occasions that warrant something extraordinary. But the bride, my dear friend, who was the reason we were all gathered that day, had specifically asked me to wear it. She'd seen it once before at a dinner party, and she'd fallen in love with it. She'd called it her something sparkly inspiration, said she loved how elegant it was, how it made a statement without being ostentatious. So when she asked me to please wear that special necklace to her bridal shower because it would make her happy, I agreed. I wanted to honor her request, wanted to be part of making her day special. I had no idea that my choice to wear that particular piece would set off a chain of events that would fundamentally shift the dynamic between me and my cousin forever. My cousin, looking at that necklace with her trained eye for trends and labels, but with complete lack of knowledge about actual fine jewelry, saw exactly what she expected to see. She saw me, the girl she had categorized as basic and budget-conscious, wearing what appeared to be a delicate diamond necklace. And because she had already decided who I was and what I could afford, she made the only assumption that fit her narrative. It must be fake. It must be costume jewelry, cubic zirconia, or glass made to look like diamonds, the kind you can buy online for a few dollars. The fraction of what real stones would cost. After all, I didn't flaunt my wealth, didn't post about luxury purchases, didn't carry bags with logos she could recognize. In her worldview, that meant I didn't have wealth to flaunt. The possibility that I might be wealthy but simply chose not to perform my wealth for an audience never crossed her mind. Sitting through that bridal shower, knowing what was coming but not yet sure exactly how it would unfold, I kept touching that necklace, feeling its weight, feeling the certainty of what it represented. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry, as expensive as it was. This was about my journey, my choices, my right to define success on my own terms rather than on terms dictated by people who measured worth in Instagram likes and brand recognition. My cousin had taken something personal and meaningful and turned it into a group joke, and that, more than anything, was what burned. Not the insult itself, but the casual cruelty of reducing someone's story to a punchline. The games portion of the shower was in full swing, that particular chaos of women gathered in a beautifully decorated space playing silly games designed to make everyone laugh and give the bride memorable moments. We'd already done several rounds of typical bridal shower entertainment, guessing games and advice cards and all the usual festivities. The maid of honor was leading the activities with enthusiastic energy, and everyone was in that pleasant state of tipsy and happy that comes from champagne and desserts and an afternoon with no responsibilities. Then she announced the next game, and I felt something click into place in my mind, a sense of timing so perfect it felt almost orchestrated by fate itself. She called it the price guessing game, where we'd look at various items in the room and try to guess what they cost. We started with the obvious things, the cake, the flower arrangements, the venue rental. People were throwing out guesses, laughing when they were wildly wrong, gasping when the real prices were revealed. It was all very lighthearted and fun, exactly the kind of activity that fits a bridal shower. And then, and I still don't know if this was planned or if the maid of honor just thought it would be interesting, she pointed at my necklace and said, "Okay, next round, let's guess how much her necklace would cost if it were real." The phrasing itself was telling, the assumption built right into the question that of course it wasn't real, we were just playing pretend. The room erupted in giggles and speculation, and I watched it happen with a strange sense of detachment, like I was observing the scene from outside my own body. My cousin, never one to miss an opportunity, jumped in immediately. Her voice carried that particular tone of someone who thinks they're being clever and funny, that condescension and amusement that made my skin prickle. She said, $20 max. It's cute for photos, though." More laughter, more knowing looks, more of that terrible solidarity that comes from collectively agreeing that someone is being gently mocked. A few other people threw out similarly low numbers, all playing along with the joke that my necklace was obviously costume jewelry, and we were all in on the fun of pretending otherwise. The bride looked slightly uncomfortable, probably remembering that she'd specifically asked me to wear this piece, but the momentum of the game had taken over and there was no graceful way to redirect it. This was my moment, and I knew it with absolute certainty. I could feel my heartbeat steady and strong, could feel a calmness settling over me that came from knowing exactly what I was about to do and knowing it was justified. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small curve of my lips that probably looked like I was trying to be a good sport about their teasing. Then I said, in a voice that was conversational and pleasant and completely devoid of anger, that actually this was the perfect time to clear up a small misconception. The room didn't quite go silent, but there was a noticeable shift in attention, everyone turning to look at me with varying degrees of curiosity and amusement. I reached into my bag, the designer bag that my cousin probably dismissed as a good knockoff since I didn't make a big deal about owning it, and I pulled out a folder. It was a professional folder, the kind that jewelers use, with a clasp and thick paper and an air of official documentation. I opened it carefully, took out the appraisal document, and handed it to the bride. I said, "Could you please read the estimated replacement value line?" And my voice was still calm, still pleasant, still completely controlled. The bride took the document, looking confused but willing to play along, probably thinking this was some kind of elaborate joke I was setting up. She looked down at the paper, her eyes scanning the text, and I watched her face change as she registered what she was reading. The professional letterhead, the detailed description of the piece, the photographs, and that number, that beautiful, undeniable number. She read it aloud, her voice starting confident and then trailing off into something like shock. Estimated replacement value, $320,000. For a moment, nothing happened. The words hung in the air like they were waiting for permission to be real, for someone to confirm that this wasn't part of the game, that this was actual information being shared. Then, the reactions started cascading through the room like dominoes falling. Someone gasped, someone else said, "What?" like it was a question and an exclamation at the same time. Another voice said, "You're kidding," in a tone that desperately wanted me to be kidding. I let the moment breathe, let them process, let the reality of what they'd just heard sink into their champagne fuzzy brains. Then I spoke again, my voice still that same pleasant, conversational tone that made it clear I wasn't angry or defensive, just stating facts. I said, "It's real, certified by a professional gemologist, fully insured, and no, I didn't get it from some questionable online retailer or a too-good-to-be-true sale." I paused, just for a beat, and then I added with the tiniest hint of something sharp underneath the pleasantness. So I guess I can afford at least one piece of real jewelry after all. The room erupted in a completely different kind of noise now. People suddenly crowding closer to see the necklace properly, voices overlapping with compliments that felt desperate and overcompensating. "It's absolutely stunning. I can't believe it. You must be doing so well. Oh my God, I should have known it was real. The way it catches the light is incredible." But I wasn't looking at any of them. I was looking at my cousin, watching her face cycle through expressions so quickly it was almost fascinating from a psychological perspective. First, there was the frozen smile, that social mask we all learn to wear when we're caught off guard in public. Then, color drained from her face, a visible paling that made her look almost ill. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then widened again as she tried to process what had just happened, tried to figure out how to recover from this, how to spin it, how to make it okay. She laughed, but it was the wrong kind of laugh, brittle and forced and obviously fake. She said, "Oh, I was just joking. You know I didn't mean anything by it." And her voice had that quality of someone who desperately needs everyone to believe them, but knows they probably don't. The rest of the shower continued, but something fundamental had shifted in the room's energy. People who'd barely spoken to me all afternoon suddenly wanted to be my best friend, asking about my work, my life, what I did that allowed me to own something so valuable. An aunt pulled me aside and whispered, almost reverently, that this wasn't costume jewelry, this was generational wealth around my neck, as if she'd discovered some secret truth about my place in the family hierarchy. My cousin retreated to her corner with her friends, their circle noticeably quieter now, their earlier confidence replaced with a kind of embarrassed awareness that they'd gotten something very, very wrong. I accepted compliments graciously, answered questions vaguely, and mostly just enjoyed the fact that the truth was finally, publicly, undeniably out there. The confrontation I'd been half expecting, half hoping for, came later, after most of the games were done and people had dispersed to the dessert table or the photo backdrop or small conversation clusters. My cousin found me in the hallway near the restrooms, and for the first time that day, we were alone. Her face was set in that particular expression people get when they're angry but trying to control it, when they want to lash out but know they're on socially unstable ground. She started immediately. No preamble, no pretense of casual conversation. She said I didn't have to embarrass her like that, said I'd made her look shallow and petty in front of everyone, said I knew she was just kidding and I should have let it go instead of making a scene. I let her finish, let her get all of it out, and then I responded with a calmness that I'd been cultivating since that moment at the gift table when she'd first opened her mouth. I told her that she had stood in the middle of my best friend's bridal shower in front of at least 20 women, including family members and mutual friends, and announced that I couldn't afford real jewelry. I reminded her that she hadn't said it quietly or privately. She'd said it loud enough for half the room to hear, said it with a laugh that invited others to join in mocking me. I explained that she had assumed my simple taste meant I was broke, had used that assumption to make herself feel superior, and had turned my personal choice into a public joke. I said, "You made me your punchline. You used my dignity as a prop for your sense of superiority, and all I did was show the truth." She tried to interrupt, tried to say something about how I was being too sensitive, how everyone knew she didn't mean anything serious by it, how I should have just laughed along, but I wasn't finished, and I wasn't going to let her reframe this as my problem, my oversensitivity, my inability to take a joke. I told her that if she looked shallow right now, if she felt embarrassed and exposed, that wasn't because of my diamonds, it was because of her attitude. I said the problem wasn't that I owned expensive jewelry, the problem was that she'd built an entire narrative about who I was based on assumptions and judgments, and when reality contradicted that narrative, she didn't have the grace to accept it. Then I set a boundary, clear and firm and non-negotiable. I told her that from this moment forward, she would not make public comments about my income, my possessions, my clothing, or my choices. I said if she felt the need to discuss my financial situation, she had exactly two options: tell the truth or say nothing. I explained that I understood she had some need to feel superior, some insecurity that drove her to constantly position herself above others, but I was no longer available to be the person she used to make herself feel better. I said I was marrying her cousin, working hard at my career, living my life according to my own values, and none of that required her approval or her commentary. Her face went through another series of expressions, and I could see her struggling with the urge to fight back, to defend herself, to turn this around somehow. But what could she say? I hadn't yelled, hadn't called her names, hadn't made threats. I'd simply stated facts and set boundaries, the kind of boundaries I should have set years ago when this pattern first started. Finally, she managed to say that we'd talk about this later when everyone was so emotional, which was her way of retreating while trying to save face. I nodded, told her I looked forward to a conversation where she actually listened instead of just waiting for her turn to talk, and watched her walk away with her shoulders tight and her head high, trying to maintain dignity in a situation where dignity had become a scarce commodity. The rest of the shower was surprisingly pleasant. Without my cousin's running commentary poisoning the atmosphere, I actually enjoyed myself. I talked to the bride, laughed with friends, ate too much cake, and took silly photos at the backdrop. And every time I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a mirror or window, saw that necklace catching the light exactly the way $320,000 diamonds should catch light, I felt something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite vindication, but was somewhere beautifully in between. Did this solve everything between me and my cousin? Of course not. Did it fundamentally change our relationship? Absolutely. From that day forward, she couldn't pretend I was her charity case, her less fortunate relative, her example of how not to present yourself to the world. The story of the bridal shower spread through the family with the kind of speed that only truly dramatic moments achieve. People who'd been at the shower told people who hadn't, adding their own interpretations and emphasis, and within a week, everyone in the extended family knew that I'd worn a necklace worth more than most people's cars to a casual afternoon event, and my cousin had called it fake in front of an audience. The narrative my cousin had spent years building, the one where she was the successful, sophisticated one, and I was the basic, budget-conscious one, crumbled like a house of cards in a strong wind. Suddenly, family members were looking at me differently, treating me differently, asking different kinds of questions about my life and work. My cousin, for her part, became noticeably quieter at family gatherings. She still wore her logo bags and trend-driven outfits, but somehow they seemed less impressive now, less like markers of success and more like desperate attempts at validation. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, and we both knew it. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if I could have handled it differently, if there was a way to address her pattern of put-downs without the dramatic reveal at the bridal shower. But then I remember how many times I'd swallowed her insults, how many gatherings I'd endured her implications that I was less than, how many moments I'd smiled through while she positioned herself as superior. And I realized that sometimes the only way to change a deeply entrenched dynamic is to provide irrefutable evidence that the dynamic is based on false assumptions. My cousin had built her sense of superiority on the belief that visible wealth equals actual wealth, that expensive taste equals financial success, that whoever spends the most time talking about their wealth is usually the person most insecure about it. I didn't need to scream about my success or wear logos like armor or perform richness for social media. I just needed to be authentically myself, invest wisely in things that mattered to me, and trust that eventually the truth would reveal itself. My cousin said I couldn't afford real jewelry. The $320,000 appraisal said otherwise. And in that gap between her assumption and reality, between what she thought she knew and what was actually true, lies one of life's most important lessons. Never judge someone's worth by how loudly they announce it. Never assume you know someone's story based on surface observations. And never, ever underestimate the person who moves quietly through the world with nothing to prove. Because sometimes the person wearing the simplest outfit and the smallest smile is also wearing more value around their neck than you'll see in a lifetime of logo bags and Instagram hauls. And when they finally show you what they're really working with, when the appraisal folder comes out and the numbers speak for themselves, the only sound louder than your shock will be the absolute silence of your assumptions crumbling into dust.